The voicemail was 43 seconds long. I know because I played it 4 times in the parking garage beneath the convention center, sitting in my car in full regalia, blue hood, gold cords, the whole academic costume, while my phone screen fogged from my breath in the November cold. My mother's voice was cheerful, not apologetic, cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart. We're just sitting down to eat. Your aunt drove all the way from Phoenix, and you know how she gets if we push the reservation. We'll watch the recording later tonight, I promise. Your father says congratulations. Love you." That was it. No background noise of a freeway, no shuffle of someone running late. Just restaurant ambiance, silverware, and a woman who had confused a live stream link with showing up. I was 40 minutes from receiving my doctoral hood in nutritional biochemistry. 8 years of work, 2 publications, 1 fellowship that paid my rent for 3 years while I mapped metabolic disease pathways in low-income rural counties. My mother was at Carmine's Steakhouse, celebrating my younger sister's promotion to district sales manager at a pharmaceutical company. I found that out from the family group text where my aunt had posted a photo of the dessert menu with 3 fire emojis. The academic procession was about to begin. I got out of the car. Let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever arrived somewhere important and realized mid-arrival that you had been the only one who understood it was important? That specific flavor of alone, I had been marinating in it for years before that parking garage. It just took a voicemail to finally taste it clearly. I grew up in a house where achievement operated on a sliding scale calibrated entirely to my sister Dana. Dana was magnetic the way some people simply are. Loud laugh, easy confidence, the kind of person who walks into a room and makes it reorganize itself around her. Our parents did not consciously prefer her. I believe that now. But unconscious preference has consequences that feel identical to the conscious kind. Dana's B+ was a triumph. My A- was, "You seem tired lately, Margot. Everything okay?" Dana's entry-level job offer was a dinner at Carmine's. My full academic scholarship was, "You'll want to eat something before your shift at the tutoring center." By the time I was standing in the procession line at the University of Colorado adjusting my hood while strangers' parents took photos around me, I had accumulated a decade of those small recalibrations, the ones where you quietly lower your own expectations so the gap between what you hoped for and what arrived doesn't split you open. A woman beside me in line, older, second career, radiating the particular warmth of someone who had fought hard to be there, noticed me standing without anyone fussing over my collar or straightening my regalia. "Is your family inside already?" she asked. "They couldn't make it," I said. She touched my arm once briefly. "Then we'll cheer extra loud for each other." Her name was called before mine. I cheered loudly. When they called mine, Margot Voss, Doctor of Philosophy in Nutritional Biochemistry and Public Health Systems. She cheered back from across the auditorium, and I walked across that stage to the sound of a stranger keeping her word. The reception afterward was in a glass atrium overlooking the foothills. I stood at a high-top table with a glass of mediocre white wine and watched families cluster, and I thought, I have spent 31 years trying to earn a front-row seat in my own life. I took out my phone and opened the group text. Dana's promotion photos were still at the top. Below them, my earlier message. Ceremony starts at 2 o'clock, Section D, rows 12 through 20. No response. Not even a thumbs up from my father. I scrolled past all of it and opened my email. There was a message from Dr. Philippa Crane at the Meridian Institute for Food Systems Research in Portland. She had been recruiting me for 8 months. The position was lead researcher on a federally funded study examining supply chain contamination vulnerabilities in large-scale food distribution networks, essentially using data modeling to find the places where the food system was most likely to make people sick before it happened. It was, professionally, the exact thing my dissertation had been building toward. I had been hesitating because Portland meant leaving Denver, leaving the city where my parents lived, leaving the ambient possibility that someday the situation with my family would quietly improve. I replied to Dr. Crane that evening from my apartment, still in my graduation dress, eating leftover soup. I accepted the position. I told her I could start in 6 weeks. Then I did something I had been drafting in the back of my mind for 2 years. I legally changed my last name. Not to hurt anyone, not as a declaration of war. I changed it to my maternal grandmother's maiden name, Aldrin, because she had been the one person in my family. She had died when I was 19 and left me her library and a handwritten note that said, "You are going to be extraordinary. Don't let anyone talk you into being less." Margot Aldrin felt like honoring something real. Margot Voss had started to feel like a role I'd been miscast in. I told my parents in a brief email, clinical, warm enough to be decent, short enough to be honest. I explained the name change, the new position, the move to Portland. I said I needed some distance to think clearly about our relationships. I said I hoped we could have real conversations someday. My mother responded in 3 days. She said Portland was far. She said Dana was going through a difficult quarter at work and could really use my support. She said she hoped I wasn't doing this because of the graduation, because they had watched the live stream and it looked like a wonderful ceremony. My father's response was a single line. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, as usual." Dana didn't respond at all. I packed 4 boxes and a carload of books and drove north. Portland suited me in the unglamorous, functional way that the right environments do. The Meridian Institute was a converted warehouse near the waterfront, staffed by people who got visibly excited about contamination modeling and regulatory gap analysis. Dr. Crane handed me a project intake file on my first day and said, "We think there's something wrong in the mid-tier cold chain infrastructure. We just can't prove it yet. That's your job." I found it inside 7 months. Not a dramatic discovery. Science rarely is. It was a pattern in voluntary recall, data cross-referenced with outbreak reports and third-party auditing timestamps. A specific category of regional food distributors, mid-size companies operating between the large national chains and small local suppliers, had reporting structures that created a consistent 18 to 22-day blind spot between internal flagging of possible contamination chain to the FDA. That window was long enough for affected product to move through multiple retail channels and reach consumers. One of the distributors in our flag dataset was a company called Voss Family Foods. I sat with that for a long time before I said anything. My father had quietly incorporated a food distribution subsidiary 4 years earlier, extending the family's consumer goods business into regional grocery supply. I knew about it only peripherally. Dana had mentioned it once as an example of Dad's entrepreneurial instincts. I had not known until I ran the company name through our dataset that Voss Family Foods was one of 11 regional distributors our model had identified as operating within the high-risk structural window. I had not known they had received 2 informal FDA inquiries in the previous 18 months that had not resulted in formal action. My conflict of interest disclosure to Dr. Crane took about 12 minutes. She listened, asked 3 clarifying questions, and said, "You're recused from the policy recommendation section. Everything else you continue. And Margot, thank you for telling me immediately." That night I called my father. He answered on the second ring, which surprised me. We had not spoken in 4 months. I told him as clearly and factually as I could what our research had found. I told him the FDA was likely to receive our full report within 60 days. I told him the pattern we had identified in his company's reporting structure created legal exposure. I told him the responsible action was to conduct an internal audit self-report to the FDA proactively. There was a long silence. Then, "You're doing this because of the graduation." "I'm doing this," I said, "because it's my job, and because people could get sick." "People aren't sick. Not yet." "That's the point of prevention." My mother got on the line. I heard the transfer, the familiar sound of the handset being passed. "Margot?" "Honey, you have to understand what this would do to the business. Your father has worked 30 years to build something real. You want to hand that to regulators over a computer model?" I thought about the woman in the procession line who had cheered for me. I thought about my grandmother's handwritten note. I thought about the 18 to 22-day window and what could move through a supply chain in that time. "I want you to fix it before they find it," I said. "That's still an option, but it won't be an option much longer." My father came back on the line. "We didn't come to your ceremony, and now you want to destroy what we built. That's what this is." "You skipped my doctorate for a dinner reservation," I said, and my voice was steady in a way that surprised me. "I'm trying to prevent a public health event." "Those are not the same story." He hung up. I contacted a public interest attorney who specialized in research whistleblower protections the next morning. I documented everything, my disclosure, to Dr. Crane, the timeline of my recusal, every communication with my family. The FDA received our full report 61 days later. 3 other researchers were listed as primary authors. I was listed as a contributing analyst with a disclosed conflict of interest. The investigation moved with the particular quiet efficiency of federal agencies when the evidence is organized and the paper trail is clean. Within 4 months, Voss Family Foods had received a formal warning letter, a mandatory corrective action plan, and a civil penalty that my attorney explained matter-of-factly would likely result in a whistleblower protection payout once the process concluded. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be precise about that, because the triumphant version of the story would be easier to tell, and also untrue. What I felt was a heavy, specific relief, the kind that comes not from winning, but from the exhausting work of being consistent. I had done my job. I had told my family what was coming. I had documented my own complicated position, honestly. The outcome was not something I had engineered. It was something I had simply refused to prevent. My mother sent a letter, real paper, careful handwriting. It said they had lost 2 major retail accounts. It said my father was meeting with attorneys every week. It said Dana was very upset and felt I had betrayed the family. Near the end, in smaller letters then, the rest it said, "I think about your graduation sometimes. I don't know if we understood what it meant to you." I read that sentence many times. I noticed what it was and what it was not. It was an acknowledgement. It was not an apology. It was the closest thing to honesty my mother had offered me in years, and it arrived only after consequence had made honesty affordable. I wrote back. I said I was sorry for the difficulty they were facing. I said I had tried to give them the chance to avoid it. I said I was open to honest conversations, not performances of resolution. I signed it with my name, my full, legal, chosen name, and I meant both parts of it equally. The whistleblower payout, when it arrived, was significant enough that I blinked at the number for a long time before accepting it was addressed to me. I put a portion of it toward a down payment on a small house in Portland, with a garden I don't entirely know how to tend yet. I put another portion into a research fund at the Meridian Institute for graduate students from rural, low-income backgrounds studying food systems. The students who would have been me 20 years ago, working a tutoring center shift after receiving scholarship news that nobody celebrated. I have not spoken to my father. My mother and I exchange brief, careful emails every few months. Dana sent a message last winter that said only, "I hope you're well." I replied that I was. Both of those things were true. Here's what I know now that I did not know at 31, standing in a parking garage in the cold, playing a voicemail for the 4th time. Some people will only ever understand the value of what you do when the absence of it cost them something. That is not a tragedy. It is information. And information in the right hands is not a weapon. It is just clarity. I tend the garden badly. The house is quiet in the mornings. I make coffee and watch the fog come off the hills and think, this is what I was trying to get to, all those years of being the second story in someone else's house. So I'll leave you with this. If the people in your life have confused your reliability with their entitlement, your competence with their convenience, at what point does staying loyal to them become disloyal to yourself? And when you finally answer that question honestly, what do you think you'll do with the answer?